Welcome, everyone. My name is Ulrike Mueller. I want to talk about different e-commerce systems on-premise, cloud, and headless, and compare the different approaches. So I don't want to compare actual systems. What I want to do is to look at these three archetypes of e-commerce platforms, how they are different, and give some recommendations. But first, a little bit about my background. I've been working for several e-commerce platform companies. First, I was with the company Intershop from 1997 to 2003, and there I was the chief software architect for what is known today as Intershop Infinity. Then I joined Demandware in the beginning and helped create this company. Started with 5 people and grow it up to going public in 2013, which is a software as a service platform, Intershop, an on-premise system, classical software license model, Demandware, or nowadays Salesforce Commerce Cloud, a SaaS e-commerce platform. And over the last 4 years, I was CTO at Newstore focusing on mobile and omnichannel. And actually, internally, the architecture is close to a headless system. So I had experiences of building these systems also in different decades. And that's why I want to dive into a little bit what are the differences between these archetypes and where these differences come from. So first of all, like a very simple slide and talking about the obvious differences. So that's what on the first look everyone talks about it. Licensed software. So I use this term licensed software instead of on-premise throughout the talk. Is the merchant or third party operates the complete technology stack, and actually what is delivered is the core software. It enables broad customization, and it's a classical software license model. And there's variations where you can get it hosted somewhere, you can an ASP model on-premise, so there's different variations to this one. The typical thing what you say about a SaaS provider is that it's a full e-commerce solution which is operated for the merchant. You don't have to think about the technology. Someone handles it end-to-end. You have like a PaaS-like platform as a service like customization where you can have own templates, own look and feel. It's often actually all these systems out in the market often classified with that they have proprietary technology. And I'll talk a little bit where this comes from, and then also do you pay a subscription. And then we have the headless systems, which basically says we're delivering a service, but just as an API. So no full end-to-end solution, just an API. Still, someone needs to build a front end in front of it, either the merchant themselves or an agency. And it's typically known that you can use fairly open technologies for the front end. So these are the typical known the knowledge about the systems. But I would like to look at these technologies from a little bit different perspective, from 2 perspectives. And the first perspective is that I actually look at what is actually necessary to run an e-commerce website, an e-commerce mobile website, or any e-commerce offering. There's actually a lot of technology comes together in one point. And first of all, we have the raw infrastructure. We have data centers, we have servers, we have database, networks, CDN, also some things like DDoS protection. So really hard, basic infrastructure. On top of it, we have all the software stack, the actual business logic, the shipping integrations, payment integrations, analytics BI. And then on top of it, we have specific things like the integration into the ERP system, desktop front end, mobile front end, and I can think a lot of other things like integration into the store POS system. All of this these technology stacks, there's also necessary people who operate this. So there's personnel cost associated with it. What at the end, what the licensed software does, it basically only covers the e-commerce, typically just the actual software package. So the e-commerce business logic, shipping integration, payment integration, in my example, it can be a little bit more, but it's the core business logic. An e-commerce platform is a complete end-to-end stack. They covered all the technologies. When you, for example, buy a Demandware system, there's automatically integration with Akamai CDN is, for example, included into the whole pricing package. So it's a complete end-to-end stack. And then we have the headless system, which basically only says we go up to the level of the business logic and leave the rest up for the customization. Well, the interesting aspect when I look from this perspective at this stack is that actually this is a vertical integration, end-to-end vertical integration, which means also the SaaS provider can optimize the whole stack for certain aspects. They can make sure, for example, that they can leverage the CDN in a perfect way. They can tune much better, for example, the database to their business logic to make overall a better package. This is a general thing which is also known from other industries where there's a vertical integration and where you can also, by putting this all together, optimize the pieces to each other, and also you can save cost by operating it at scale. In comparison to this one, the e-commerce license software package allows a broader selection of vendors. So for example, you could decide if you want to have a specific hosting vendor, you can pick the hosting vendor, or you can pick your specific CDNs. So you have a broader selection of this technology. It comes also with the responsibility of operating these. And the service provider, Headless, they also follow the idea of the vertical integration. You only see the API, you don't know what is behind it, but they don't do it for the full stack, they only do it for the partial of the stack. The comparison is, for example, I take this example of a little bit of the product detail page. A licensed software, you would get the business logic to provide a product detail page. You get a template, which you can customize. That's what you deliver, the core business process. And you can now think about it. Am I getting it to a hosting partner? Want to put a CDN in front of it? And and you have your choices. A SaaS provider would give you at the end the same business logic. It is the same business logic to run a product, to have a template in front of it, but they would come, for example, already with a deep integration, for example, into a CDN to have a top performance, so that the product detail page is already pre-tuned and set up in a way, for example, to leverage all the capabilities of the prepackaged CDN. And that's where you see also the difference and the advantage also of the vertical integration. A headless is, I describe in a way, they deliver the detailed product information through an API endpoint. Exactly that, nothing more, and that with a top performance. So there's also something behind it. There's hidden how this is done. It's hidden from you, but at the end, you only get the core information. So this is just an example also to show especially the difference between the licensed software and then the vertical integration of the SaaS provider. So the vertical integration is one way to look at these different archetypes of systems. Another way is to look at the history of technical innovations and when these packages were created, because a lot of their why they are in the way they are is rooted also when they were created. And I have put up here a timeline together. We have first like the group of what I call licensed software packages, then the SaaS packages and headless systems. So you can see here, for example, the Intershop Infinity system was created in the late 90s. Things like an Oxy 2004, Magento 2007. The SaaS companies, they were all in the late 2000 years, Demandware 2004, Shopify 2006, and I took another one, BigCommerce from the US 2009. You can see it's a kind of a second wave. And then headless systems, I have here like Spryker. Spryker actually I have put in also a little bit of in the licensed software. It's not 100% a headless system, but it's primarily a headless system. 2011, also CIO commerce tool in that time, or About You Cloud in 2017. So you can clearly see all systems created in this decade. What we can now look into is also technical innovation, which happened also in that time frame. So when I look at here, I have put in some technologies which I think are important, is look, for example, REST. REST comes back to a thesis from Roy Fielding in 2000. It took a long time until it really got widespread adoption, more in the late 2000 years, before we're all dealing with SOAP XML. Intel virtualization, everyone knows about virtualization. The actual chip command set was brought to market in 2005. AWS launched EC2 in 2006. Then I think this decade we saw a lot of front-end technologies. I think about Angular 2010, React.js in 2013. So you can see certain technologies were not available in the 2000 years. They were only available in this decade. And this also defined, when you now think about what I had before on this one, you can also overlap why they had only certain technologies available. Also, the technologies, I describe them like also in 3 phases, and I would call it the first wave. The first phase, the industry was just dealing with, we're just thinking about the internet as a client-server model, and that's where a lot of the systems which were created in the late 90s rooted still in that thought model. I think then in the 2000 decade with Amazon, it started that infrastructure became a commodity. To run something in the on the web, run something on a server, it's a no-brainer. It has a very cheap price, and you can run it. And what I see now, especially over the last 5-8 years, I call it like an explosion of front-end technologies. There's not a single month where there's not a new front-end tool. There's new ways how to reach customers, experience with new technologies. And that's describe these 3 technology waves also, which also go a little bit in the line also with the e-commerce platforms. We can also look at the demands or the innovations within e-commerce. I put in search engine optimization. I was basically dealing with that as long as I could think in e-commerce, specifically when Google became popular. I looked up Cyber Monday. The term was coined in 2005. Before that one, that was the time when it started that retailers and merchants had the problem that suddenly there's a spike in traffic. When you have a spike in traffic, you have to think about your server capacity. So this was not there before, that you hadn't to think about it. Social media as a channel. Also, for example, like Square put in 2010, when you think about how can you bring mobile technology into the store, that came actually fairly late. And then 2014 is the year when mobile traffic in the internet surpassed desktop traffic. So this was also these years around 14, 15 were a lot determined by how can I get into a mobile site. So this is also the ways what we see. And I describe them as, first of all, I think from the late 90s to the mid 2000s, people were just thinking, how can I get on the internet? How can I get on there? And that's what I saw a lot with the projects, even back at Demandware. And nowadays, it is more a question, how can I manage the plethora of customer interaction points, of new things? Is it voice? Is it IoT? There's new interaction points coming up, and I have to serve the customer on this interaction point. So when I look at background here, these things, the waves of the e-commerce platforms, the technologies we have here, the demands from e-commerce innovation, that also makes clear how these systems are overlapping for these times. So that also means that, for example, licensed software, all these vendors in this area were basically conceived before there was a cloud evolution. They were conceived for a time when there was servers, hosted servers, owned servers in a data center. That's where these systems were conceived. The SaaS providers, they were conceived before there was this explosion of front-end technology. Like when we started with Demandware, there was even no talk about Ajax, or single-page applications. They were conceived in these times when this was not available. And that is also with all the companies who basically started this decade. They are really completely embracing the concept of cloud services. And then combined with what I said, these models still have their value today. As I said before, for example, with the vertical integration as a SaaS provider, that I don't have to think about it. I get an end-to-end technology stack. Or on the other side, the freedom that I have to pick other technologies around my licensed software. So these are both models which have value, and also the headless provider as a new model really completely embracing all these front-end technologies which were created. Also, one thing I said, I categorized the software packaging that way, but also have to add that a lot of these classical licensed software vendors, they have hosting offers, some made steps into the cloud. Also, they have API offerings. Also, the SaaS providers have REST API offerings. It's not that they have changed. It's just today you still can sometimes feel where their origin comes from and where they are rooted in. I would like now to step over and think about what this means from my perspective as an advice. General advice when to use it, an advice for CIOs, an advice for developers. So licensed software, I think the reason to use a licensed software when there's really like a strong desire to use different vendors along the technology stack. I mentioned one thing, for example, there's a hosting partner for specific privacy concern. You could think about like in the B2B, you even want to run it because of certain privacy concerns on your own data center. My recommendation is also if that is a reason to go for a licensed software, you should also really think about and leverage that. And also, as licensed software, because of that one, because you can pick certain technologies, it's probably the better choice also when you have fairly extreme, fairly unique customization needs. The caveat is a little bit, and that's my recommendation for CIOs, check your total cost of ownership. What you really are paying in total. What is your personnel cost? What kind of people do you have to hire? What kind of people do you have to have on your team so that you can operate these stacks? Some companies, they have large enough teams and they can easily handle this. Other companies don't have the people, would need to hire. So this is an important thing. And the other thing, what I said already, if you choose the approach, leverage it, also the freedom you have with that one. For developers, it's because infrastructure is not a given, it will be always necessary to have someone with a certain good understanding of infrastructure in the team, and also should be good for a developer to have some understanding of that. For the SaaS solution, clearly the number one point is, for me, is it's hands off from the technical operation. A lot can be handed off. And this is also my advice for CIOs. I heard actually very often at Demandware that the CIO said, oh, I have so many projects here on board. I'm so resource constrained. I'm glad I can give that to you. You take care of that one. And I can take care, for example, of the ERP replacement. That is something I cannot give to someone else. I have to operate this. I have to take care of the ERP replacement. I heard this very often back at Demandware, and where the CIOs were glad that we were basically handling that one. It is also an advantage that typically you can get from these vendors a fairly broad feature set in a consistent environment where things are working together. That's also a reason to go through a SaaS vendor. It clearly also means you're locked in. It's they operate a complete stack, and for that one is my advice also check, for example, with other customers of the SaaS vendor, what is the responsiveness? What is if there is an issue? Can I reach someone? Who can I reach? Who can help me? So to really have here a comfortable feeling that they're really helping you, serving you, and not just run the servers and don't listen to you. That's an important aspect. For developers, I mentioned before that a lot of the technologies feel a little bit proprietary. And when you look at the timeline, you now also understand why they were created, these technologies, before there was all these modern front-end frameworks. They were created before there was really a wide adoption of REST APIs. And you can still feel that somewhat. And that always requires that you have learned to some degree proprietary technology. And also because the complete stack is provided, technology stack and operated, it sometimes feels a little bit like magic. What is going on now when I do this and this? That's also what you should expect. And for headless solution, it's clearly something what I would recommend when front-end experiences and differentiating through a front-end experience is very important for you. It's strategically important, but you don't want to program the card and you don't want to program the product information. You must just consume it as a service. It's also good when you say, I want to minimize my technical operation, but I'm fine to still operate it a little bit. It's still, even with a headless system, somewhere the front end has to live somewhere. You can do it as a single page application, has no server aspect, but there are also approaches where you need some aspects on the server. You might need to run own services when you want to, for example, for integration. So expect that there's still some necessary of technical operation, but it's not as demanding as, for example, with a licensed model. What I think with this model, when you're focusing on the front end, is also a recommendation: bring the developers close to the marketing and e-commerce team, so that you really fully leverage this. If no new ideas are created in the marketing and the e-commerce team, that they can quickly be brought into the code base and the web, and the site can be changed. That is a model when you really have this focus on the front end technology and want to have the freedom there. For developers, my advice is focus on the front-end technologies. Also, make sure that you know all stuff about APIs, REST, GraphQL, but also maybe how to write a cloud function, an AWS Lambda function, or a Google Cloud function. And I expect that there will still be a lot of changes in the market. Maybe new frameworks popping up, new tools. Also, for example, what I have not seen, I see it's a little bit on the market that they're ready to build like front-end frameworks for e-commerce sites are coming up. Vue has one, but I've not seen too many. I guess is that over the next years, there will be frameworks, vendors coming up who provide complete front-end stacks, customizable front-end stacks. So now it's also, after this advice, I want to look a little bit into the future. Where I think where it will go and what maybe will be the future architecture of e-commerce sites. So in general, when I look, I personally believe into the service model, and what I see here, what the driving forces are for a service model. On one side, you have an e-commerce service provider. On the other side, you have the merchant. And what the driving forces for them is that they focus on their core business. For the merchant, it's selling products, it's engaging with the customer, it's promoting their brand. Just as a few examples, that's their core business, and that's what they want to focus on. It's not necessary to think about the technology side. On the other side, the e-commerce service providers, they want to focus on the core business process, the standardized business processes. They will continuously evolve around that one. Their focus is around operating these services and providing reliability, availability, and security. So these are the two core business, what's in their core business, and they will put more. There will be more emphasis, and they will expand in this business. So the merchant will have to deal with more demand from customers, more towards personalized experience, more touch points, more innovation through experiences. And the e-commerce provider will try to add more value add to their core business services. They will make higher level offerings, but also will leverage economies of scale. And economies of scale also means that there will be certain price pressure, where I think that e-commerce services will become more and more commodities, that I can buy my card, my price information, my promotion, shipping, and everything just as a commodity, which I can easily consume service. So this is a process which will continue, and you see some signs in the market, and it's all just driven by standardization of core business processes, economics of scale, and then a price pressure. I think this will be also then come to a point that service mix will become more like a norm. And when I put this into a picture, what I think about the future architecture will look like this, that I have services from vendors that are even maybe mix different vendors, but there's a lot that's happening already today that is even becomes more prominent. I consume that as services. I have front-end frameworks, front-end tools, and what I expect that these services will become commodities. There will be also, to a good degree, interchangeable commodities, and that a lot of the innovation will happen out on the front ends. There will be new front-end frameworks, new front-end tools, maybe integration tools. There might be also coming 2 layers, maybe something kind of an API integration layer, abstraction layer, or I heard also this term backend for frontend, something where basically the front-end system is running, and maybe something like kind of a data integration layer. I have seen this with some customers. They have already data warehouses just for the purpose to aggregate the information from the different systems. So this could be also potentially layers which we will see in the future. So that's the future. This is also the end of my my talk. So we'll see what the future brings. And so maybe in a few years I come here and talk again about the 4th wave of the systems or how the future will evolve. So thank you. So any questions?
Do you think with that last slide and that data warehouse layer down there, we'll see something which we saw in that talk from Laurent with those global IDs which Google is pushing right now through their API, like spreading out into other services, or do you think every vertical has its own ontology basically?
So the global ID is a question again, how much the merchants want to give away data. So that's a different question. But what I have seen with a few companies that they build internal systems where they basically like the simple thing is a central customer database. But then you can come up that you have central product information databases. That's what I have already seen today with merchants that they implement these kinds of systems. Sometimes it's really just one central database where they feed all the information. So from that side, I expect it will happen within the merchant. Whether it's really global, I have my doubts because of the value of all these data for the merchant. Okay. Other questions? One more. Don't see anything. Okay, then I say thank you.